Okay, all, it's 5 o'clock on the 4th of December. Thanks for making the time. I can't believe it's almost the end of your first semester. Hopefully, everyone's looking forward to having it behind you. Really just wanted to take a little time to check in today, see how the projects were going, see how the foreseeable projects are, and then we'll kind of go over the nuts and bolts of what you can expect as far as that final class period. But thought I'd just open it up, turn it into a discussion if possible, to find out how y'all are doing. And, I was able to glean a little bit of some problems and whatnot from the discussion board. And anyway, just wanted to turn it over to see if anyone wanted to discuss some issues you were having. Everyone's flying high, huh?
So an issue I started running into today was that the company that had been previously recycling ski boots and bindings no longer does. And after calling like 30 different recycling centers today, it seems that no one does.
Okay.
So I haven't lost hope yet, but the people who had started a program similar a few years back were part of the Outdoor Industry Association. And so I'm going to try tomorrow or the next day to reach out and see maybe who would have been in charge of that program and how they did it and what machines they used, and just kind of get some details to see if there's hope currently or if it's a way bigger thing than I thought it would be.
So that was the company, just to give you guys a bit of background, that was the company Saren and I were discussing on the discussion board from last week. They're out of, I believe, Johnstown, Colorado or something like that, way up in the Greeley area. Did they give you any indication of why they stopped other than the China?
No, the girl was very short with me, and she just said that they didn't have the equipment anymore. So it seems like it's feasible because there's obviously equipment that does it, but I don't know what that equipment is or what happened with the equipment or.
Got it. Yeah, I would typically think a grinder would be your first start, which is you can think of anything from throwing in a old car tire to grind up for playground type of equipment or ground, and then a granulator would be another thought of a plastic. Yeah, that's trouble. I tell you what, Sarah, I've got a contact. I'm not sure if it's going to be helpful, but I'll send that information on to you. From that company that deals with more of the hands-on stuff, so maybe that'll be helpful. I mean, it's certainly any information will probably be welcomed. So
yeah, seems very feasible, except for now that one jolt in the road.
Yeah. Do you have any? Can you provide any more information? You said that there was a company within the outdoor industry that was doing it prior.
So it was the Outdoor Industry Association, and they had some projects probably like 4 or 5 years ago, I think, where they had started trying to recycle skis, boots, and bindings, but it seems like it stopped because of funding, from what I've gathered.
Got it.
So, I mean, I could totally understand that.
Yeah, you're probably finding out that it's going to be pretty cost prohibitive.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Any other comments on that, Sam?
On my program or on my project?
No. Yeah.
I don't think so. That's the biggest thing I've run into.
Sure. Okay. Anybody else? I'd love to hear from all of you, even if it's going smashingly.
Hey, I'll just throw out, I'm having a hard time finding prices of raw material. That's been my biggest struggle in getting companies to answer me.
Sure.
Yeah.
So what have you found, and what are your holes?
So I found like my product involves using foam, and I found like the price of sheets of foam, but I haven't found the price of injectable foam loosely online. And I thought about it, like initially my initial project, I was thinking of using sheets of foam and then, you wrap it however you want it. But in order to get like the shapes and stuff that I would want in my product, I would need to use, I think, an injectable process.
Right.
And that to be able to achieve what I would want to achieve. And so looking into prices of machines, like I don't know if I would want to use a company that like I would just make the mold and then I would send them the mold and then they'd mass produce it. Or I don't know if I'd want to buy my own mold maker and then produce it myself, or I don't know. I'm just a little confused.
Sure. Absolutely, and that's kind of the part of the process here. So just from hearing you spitball that ideas, it would probably be something like a virgin foam, or for lack of a better concept, a plastic that comes in small that you would, hire a manufacturing company, I would think, to create your mold, which, you can ballpark a mold probably $50,000 to $80,000 just to get yourself started. And then whether or not it's multi-cavity mold, that's going to increase the cost. But yeah, I would start by looking towards some precise like plastic manufacturers to find out if they can help direct you to the right people. Like there's a manufacturing operation in Denver called Alford Manufacturing that might be able to give you some sort of ballpark. I know that we've worked with them to create molds in the past. Now, again, they're in the injection plastic manufacturing specifically, but that's not to say that they don't have the right connections to be able to direct you to the right people. There's an operation in Middle America called Green Dot Bioplastics that might help to lead you in the right direction. And certainly you could look up companies like Poly One, which is another Denver operation. I mean, they've got offices everywhere. They have one in the East Coast, Central America, Western, and then on the West Coast as well. So they'd at least be able to give you the right direction, if anything, to find out where you can look for this information. Yeah, that's kind of the nature, or the head scratching part of this whole process, is trying to find specific prices on every little part and component. Because as you found out, if you buy 10 of them, the price is going to be quite a bit higher than if you buy 10,000 of them. So it's certainly something worth looking into. Most companies, when it comes to plastics or foam, they'll have minimums that you can buy. I know that we were just looking at buying some green plastics, and we had a minimum order of 50 pounds. Now, that's because these companies are dealing in gaylords perhaps more often than anything else, because that's what these injection machines require. So that might be some good direction to at least get you some ballpark figures. Does anyone else have any thoughts on helping Sammy out?
So I had took a really long, convoluted path to figure out what I was supposed to, or what carabiners are actually made out of. It involved like this kind of one sentence on a blog somewhere that led me to a certain video that led me to certain aircraft grade aluminum, which led me to a certain provider that didn't provide it. And so it was very back and forth, and it took me like 9 steps to actually find the stuff I was looking for, and I found a lot of stuff in weird places. So, and obviously not super helpful for specific plastics, but I definitely.
Did you contact like people directly to find this information, or did you just read it online?
Mostly the stuff was read online, but like one of the most valuable things I found was this video from How It's Made, like the TV show.
Yeah.
And basically just by watching the video, I was able to kind of like pick out pieces of like, okay, this was made from this is using this, and then Google it based on what it looked like. And it was very general. So
yeah, and
it took a long time.
And what you find is all dependent on putting together the right combination of words in those searches, because if you're calling it one thing, but the industry knows it is something else, then you're never ever going to find it. So yeah, that's the struggle.
Another struggle I'm facing too is like because I don't have like solid design plans kind of built up, I'm not sure if there's going to be any other materials that my product's going to need, because it's not going to be straightforward, just foam, you know. There's going to probably be something else involved with it, like a closure system, things like that. And I don't really know what that is either and how to get that made. And so I'm just a little lost, I think.
Sure. You know, obviously you're not a graphic designer. You don't necessarily have a lot of familiarity with CAD programs, and that's okay, because the nature of this assignment, I think, is you're running into exactly how challenging it really is to bring a product to market. Yeah. So are you going to find all the answers? Well, I sure do hope so, but chances are you're not. So for that, for example, you might research particular graphic designs or CAD agencies out there, and they could certainly give you a ballpark estimate for what it would cost to utilize their services. Because if you were to actually eventually make this product, you know, God willing, I hope that happens someday, you're going to have to hire those type of vendors and services anyway. So by having at least a short list of potential people that you could use, then you could go back to that someday.
Okay. Are the CAD people technically design engineers, or is that different?
Well, it all depends on what they went to school for, but it could be anywhere from a mechanical engineer would be probably the most common, name behind their name, if that makes sense. But you'd also have, software engineers that can do that. You can have computer science engineers that can do that. You know, there's a lot of different individuals who go to school that learn how to use that software. But I would say the most common would be a mechanical engineer.
Okay.
But as you can understand, mechanical engineers can have specialties in many, many different areas. You can have someone that specializes in the outdoor industry, and then on the flip side of the coin, you can have someone that knows nothing about that, but only deals with, say, medical equipment or the creation of those type of devices. So mechanical engineer would be what I would start with.
I found a great article in a materials engineering journal that detailed some of the stuff for my project. So I'm assuming material engineering would be somewhat relevant.
Would you mind sharing that with us, Alan?
The journal itself?
Or just the article?
If I can bring it back up, it was
sure. If you can find it, don't bend over backwards. But if it's fresh in your zone, then send it on. But if not,
I've got it in the bibliography, so I'll be able to send it. But I won't hold the crowd while I'm looking for it. It was pretty minimal. It was from it was basically just analyzing the composition of carabiners using a spectrometer. So it was pretty brief, and yeah, so it was somewhat useful, just kind of as a reference.
Excellent. Anything else, Sammy?
No, I think I'm just struggling overall.
Again, just put forth as much effort as you can to try to figure these answers out. I certainly wish I had a comprehensive list of companies in your region, in all of our regions, where I could send you on. But that's kind of part of the process, is being able to track down, sniff out these different vendors that are going to help you out. Because ultimately, if you were going to do it in-house, let's say you hired a mechanical engineer to work for you, well, that's going to be your intellectual property that you keep on, that you hold on to. By hiring a vendor, typically they're signing off that they don't hold any intellectual property either. So there's kind of two ways to play it. Certainly you could do something in-house, but oftentimes it's just easier to go out and hire someone that can help you one-stop shop and then move on.
Okay.
Awesome. Thanks, Sammy.
Yeah. Thank you.
Anybody else?
I just had a quick question. I wanted to clarify, is the pitch deck, sales deck assignment, that's due next week, or is that due this week?
That's due next week. Good clarification. Both the final build of materials and your preliminary pitch deck are due next week. When I say preliminary pitch deck, because really your final pitch deck is your final presentation.
Okay. So and then the final build of materials is there.
Yeah. Here, I'll show you, just kind of give you a rundown here of this. So we had no class. You guys, last week was Unit 9, the sourcing and product breakdown that you turned in. And then this week we're talking about the building materials, sales deck, pitch deck, and how to get your product to market. And then next week, week 11, the 9th through the 15th, is when that final building materials is due and the preliminary sales deck. Again, that's kind of your rough draft so we can kind of fine tune it. And then that last week will be our last meeting together, and that's when I'll turn over and you guys will share each of your individual screens and essentially give me and your classmates your pitch. So does that kind of break down for everyone and make sense? Awesome. Okay, James, do you have anything that you've been running into while we got you on the horn?
I guess for the last assignment, I just wasn't. I feel like I just built off the assignment we did 2 weeks ago, and tried to price out, what a bladder, a tube, a bite valve, kind of like you mentioned, would cost through taking average prices of other products and then figuring out the wholesale price and the cost of the manufacturer.
Yep.
But yeah, kind of like Sammy mentioned, I was having trouble before that. I could finding what those bulk materials are and the exact amount that I'd be using for each product to try and price it that way.
Right. And you're kind of fortunate in your pick, James, in the fact that, some folks don't have any sort of benchmark where you can at least look at existing products to get yourself a rough idea of where your price might be. So you're fortunate in that capacity. But yeah, it's again, when you're doing a build of material, it's kind of a best guess, for lack of a better term, because you're eventually going to go to, Asia or China, or, hopefully you'll make your products domestically if you were to go there. But you're going to find that there's distinct price differences once you start getting into the game and creating bulk. Yeah, Sammy, and again, James, and many of you don't have any idea how much plastic it's going to take to actually make your injection product. So again, all you can do at this point is do an educated, knowledgeable guess at that point.
For that final build of materials, do you just want a list of what we have settled in on what we're going to use and why?
Yeah, you'll kind of see a little bit of a few examples in this week's Spark presentation. But yeah, and I think I commented on one of the discussions. You can build it however you want, whatever works for your critical thinking. But what I usually do when it comes to a build of materials is I just open up a brand new spreadsheet in Excel and then start building the rows to include all the information. Now, the reason I try to be so comprehensive when I do it is as you start working through this process further and further, well, you're going to forget things that you have previously thought or researched. So the more information you can provide, so manufacturer, location, if it has a SKU number, if it has some sort of identification, if there's a range of prices you can find, if there's a web HD or URL that you can cut and paste and include on there to get you there, that's going to help. So again, however, I've even put images inside of my spreadsheets before too, just so I can know and reference what I'm talking about, especially when talking to other individuals. Does that make sense? Excellent. Awesome. Thanks, James. Anything else? All right. Who's next?
I've run into a couple issues, mainly just the wide range of quotes that I've been seeing all across the internet for designing specifically an app, it's anywhere from like 20 grand to, $1.5 million. And so,
So which one are you leaning towards?
20 grand. No, it'd probably need to be a fancier group of people that, built the app, because the plan is to be so widely used that it needs to be pretty seamless.
Right.
But, another big cost that I've run into, which I kind of really just discovered this week, is legal, because there will be so many negotiations between me and other companies that I'm trying to, offer discounts for, or, whether it's needing to use Fitbit or Nike's technology, there's going to be a lot of negotiating. And so that's going to be hard to kind of plan for in terms of, lawyers and how they'll be billed, or whether I'll find somebody in-house, or, whatever it may be. But so that's a big thing. And then another one, which I'm kind of having to kind of take a couple steps back and kind of revisit my purpose and mission, is there's a significant price difference between hourly wages for engineering and designing, between, let me find it, India's $10 to $80 an hour, and the US is 50 to 100. Yeah. So, well, no, it's like 250 is the high for American hourly wage. So, the idea was to keep it, in America, really kind of keep it at home in terms of our outdoor industry and preserving America. And our national parks, obviously, we need to send a bigger message around the world, but my original market's going to be the US. So I'd like to keep everything here. But so that's another thing I'm going to have to reevaluate if, I'm really needing to save money, and depending on, what I could expect for first round, second round funding. So, a lot of those things are just kind of up in the air.
Well, I had a chance to connect with Caitlin last week, and she's doing an app as well. And we definitely brainstormed with some hidden costs that you don't necessarily think of. And I believe legal was one of them. Certainly, you have a little more concern when it comes to legal than maybe Caitlin does, because you're trying to partner up with a lot of different companies. So that certainly can be something that you run into. One thing that we came up with was the whole data storage. When we take pictures or when we send texts, that all goes somewhere. It's not just on our phones. It's somewhere out in the world. So, you have to figure out where you're going to store all that information. When you pull up an AccuWeather weather app, well, there's a ton of information that's in there. So I think that's very astute that you're coming up with these hidden costs, especially in the legal aspect. Have you found some specific app developers that you maybe could share so Caitlin can hear too? I mean, she's in Arizona, so she might have some different ones as well.
Yeah, and Evan, one of the things that I found kind of the other night was in Arizona, there's a company here. I can't remember the name of it, but I can find it and send it to you, where it's literally like, I'll call it a one-stop shop for engineers, but it's, you go to them and like you have your idea and everything, but then they provide like a team as well as like project managers, whether that's iOS engineers, smart or Samsung engineers, like the back end or front end, and like you can basically build your team and then you can get a quote and you don't have to like sign up for emails or anything, which is also really nice. But they were kind of like a good way for me to see how like what that technology team would look like, especially because like I'm like you, I have no design background, I have no technology background. So it's kind of good to just see that and actually what they like, and they just give you a quote, like a lump sum, what it would be per month, and it wasn't as like hard to do versus breaking it up
each one. Okay. Yeah, if you could find that, that'd be helpful, because I like I said, I feel like some of the quotes that I've been seeing are, just specifically for designing the app, and then some are more, the first 12 months of business funding, so some of these quotes that I'm finding are incorporating a lot more into them. And that's another thing, is kind of trying to get those numbers and then break down what is included in those. But So that might be helpful to kind of see that breakdown and be able to kind of understand, whether they quote me 20 grand and I think it might be $1 million, kind of percentage wise, expanding on that. And
Caitlin brings up a great point. If you can find the one-stop shop type of business, which there's one that we dealt with in Evergreen called Evergreen Research Incorporated, IRC, ERI, and they were able to have a product manager. They have the software developers in house. Actually, the nice thing about those type of companies is they don't all have to be in one location. I think their software guy was in Minnesota, and they had a guy that was in Alberta that was working on stuff. So, with your app development, you can start with a graphic designer. Let's, hire a graphic designer, and that camp lighting pitch deck that I showed you a couple weeks ago, we used a local guy here in Crested Butte. He charged $65 an hour, which is still reasonably priced for a graphic designer. So then because if you're not artistic, you need someone that can take your thoughts and put it on a piece of paper, because then you go to an app development company and you're like, this is what I want. This is what I want it to look like. And that's either going to, save you costs because you are coming to the table with a great deal of information to show them, or you could probably just go to the app development company and they could do it all for you. But again, you're seeing those costs, especially if you're doing it stateside, are pretty astronomical.
It's awful. I mean,
there's a company
the discrepancy is awful. But
what's that, Evan?
I said just the discrepancy in prices versus different countries is crazy. But now with something like that, would that work? Like I give them a pitch of what I envision and then they run with it, or would I remain in control of everything along the way?
Well, great question. That you're hiring them as a vendor, so
I would stay in control. Okay.
Correct. You would own everything. It's like if you wanted to build a house and you don't know how to build a house, you're hiring a contractor. That doesn't mean they get to keep the house. It's yours, if that makes sense as an analogy.
Definitely.
So, there's a company in the Front Range, I think it's called Wasabi or something like that they do all app development. So you could certainly call and get a quote, or if Kate looks like Caitlin sent Anderson Lab the price breakdown, so that could give you a little bit of direction. But typically when you hire someone, they oftentimes in this world, if you can't afford it, well, they might see the validity in the idea and say, well, that's okay, we'll give you this for free now, but we want some sort of percentage of ownership.
Gotcha. That's good to keep in mind too, because I wouldn't have expected it to be able to work that way. So that's good to know as a possibility.
Now, but with that in mind, like Caitlin and I talked about with her app, well, it's certainly in line with what REI is doing with Mountain Project. But if she doesn't have any sort of protection, like you'll recall the first week, we all signed that non-disclosure mutual non-compete. So if you don't have something like that, she says, hey, I've got this great idea. And they're like, I don't think so. Then she walks out of the room and like, we need to get on this and build this. Gotcha. So with that said, you need to be careful in protecting your own intellectual property.
And now something like that, is it a pretty, well-known thing that you go into those and you slide a NDA across the table, you sign it, and then you proceed with the meeting? Or is it, kind of just a handshake understanding of, you're here to pitch us an idea, we're not going to say anything? I mean,
well, it's
the expectation and sort of in like an etiquette in approaching that sort of thing.
A non-disclosure agreement is completely standard in most idea, product manufacturing, and vendor relations. And the only hiccup you'll see is a big company like Fitbit. Well, they're not going to sit there and read it. They're going to send it to their legal department, who's going to read it and be like, no or yes. And then from there, so typically you'll have a non-disclosure. You can show them some information. If they want to work with you, then you draft a mutual letter of intent, like that lays out what the business agreement's going to be, and then you move forward. that makes sense.
Definitely, which brings up another thing. Even on the legal side of things, I probably need tailored NDA to, I don't know, maybe I wouldn't, but is there kind of a standard NDA for those sorts of things, or is, because I have no legal, I don't know nothing.
You're absolutely right. When I first started in my current product development firm, we thought we'd save some money, and we had someone in-house write it, our first initial NDA. We then approached our lawyer and we're like, hey, can you review this? Because we were trying to save time and money. And he's, for lack of a better term, he's like, this is a bunch of garbage. And you just need to, because we don't know legalese. So there's a certain amount of, there's a reason people go to school to be lawyers. So, but with that said, you can get a great baseline with things like LegalZoom or the online, programs that are out there, because you can get, and you've got my copy to get you started, so you can look over that as well. So, but yeah, it's pretty standard, but there's a reason lawyers are around, and there's a reason that they utilize them. I mean, we use a patent lawyer that does nothing but deal with patents, and then we have a business lawyer that deals with our contracts, like letters of intent and all that. So with that said, a lawyer's not cheap. So
and
yeah, great questions. And I think that, if you wanted to look at saving costs for yourself, well, you could certainly hire a graphic designer first in order to just get your flow of how the app's going to look.
Yeah. I need to kind of focus a little bit more on that this week, actually a physical app, how I'd want it laid out, what sections I'd need. Because that was another thing too, was a lot of quotes were based on how many pages you were going to need for the app. And that, so I started making a list, and it's a lot, but.
Right. But keep in mind, Evan, you don't have to, as we look at a range plan and, which we talked about, necessarily, you don't have to go have everything right out of the gate. You can have a version 1, version 2. I mean, think about how many times your apps automatically update. It's because they're constantly making them better.
Okay.
So keep that in mind too. Awesome. Any other questions, Evan?
No, all set.
Great. Thanks.
Yeah. And then Evan, just another quick thing on that Anderson Labs that I sent out. What's really cool is like the first round, as you look at it, it will have your development team, and it will go into everything from whether you're going to do HTML and JavaScript to whatever your kind of foundation is, and you'll be able to build a team on that. And I think that will help answer a lot of the questions that you brought up. And then it's also got everything from Amazon Cloud databases, Google Cloud, all those sort of databases and what those look like in terms of design for data storage. And then it will also go to you have an engineer or a project manager, business analyst that you can add on to your team. And then you can select how long of a time range you want to rent them out for initially for that quote that they will populate. And it's, I'll call it my a scapegoat of how you can look at and build that team for one-stop shop type of place to get those people.
So
yeah. Go ahead.
I was just going to show you this. So, so this is that firm in, hold on, I'm just trying to move this. It's called Digital Wasabi. They do software development, and they're in Colorado based. So you could certainly reach out to them and, get a quote. And then the Anderson, I don't know where that one went. But there's also this small little Boulder engineering studio that they'll do everything from start to finish for you. So they have as you can see, mechanical, electrical, and software engineers all in-house. So that's the Boulder engineering studio, and that's highly recommended from us from our previous electrical engineer. So those could give you, started, but it sounds like what Caitlin has shared with you might provide you with some good direction as it is.
Definitely. That's going to help a ton.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I have a question about us presenting. Are we going to present over video and have a certain amount, a lot of time? Do we need a PowerPoint? Or are we just going to tell everyone what our findings were and if we think it would be successful or not and why.
Great question. To kind of piggyback off of James's previous question. So that final week, you're all going to give your final presentation, and you will be taking the screen, and it has to be pretty much an elevator pitch within under 10 minutes, and then with a little bit of question and answer from your classmates. But as it's set up, I've kind of put out some of those, and I think I've sent them to you a couple times now, and I know they're in this week's readings folder, but there's some templates or some examples of some building material, or sales pitch decks. And again, you can follow whatever you want, but they're generally made in PowerPoint just because it's so easy to add and change things, but you don't have to do it in PowerPoint. If you want to do it, as a Prezi, if you want to do it however you want, there's no necessarily standard that I'm holding the bar to. I want you to sell all of us your product however you see fit.
Cool.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Let's see. We've heard from most of you now. Alan, did you have anything else to add about what you've been running into, or?
No, not particularly. My big thing need a structural or mechanical engineer to design the actual piece, and the design is very much reliant on the structural engineering because of the strength rating and things like that.
Sure.
So I have ideas of what it might look like, but otherwise I can't really move forward with something until somebody who has more tensile strength engineering knowledge than I will ever have can take a look at it.
Alan,
the only other thing is that.
I'm sorry. Can I? Did you get that web link I sent to the guy that's down in Gunnison?
I don't believe so.
It was because you ran in that discussion thread. You ran into that, and I said that we dealt with a guy that's down in Gunnison, which you're in Crested Butte, right?
Fort Collins.
Oh, Fort Collins. So anyway, you could call this guy just to get an idea. He's been making these products for a company that runs high ropes courses all over the world, but they're based in Taylor Park here. And I think the company's R&R Precision. If you go back to the discussion thread from last week, I did a kind of a direct link. I believe the guy's name was Steve. Real quirky guy, but really salt of the earth, great guy, third generation Gunny local, and he has a real small operation, but he might be able to give you some direction because he's already making things in the climbing world.
Mm-hmm.
So that might be something.
That would be great. I mean, in that vein, just from what I've seen, there's all of the machining work and all of the furnaces and molds and everything would be insanely cost prohibitive to do in-house, so it would have to be contracted through somebody,
right?
Because there's just no way.
Right, absolutely, and you got to know your limits, and I appreciate it. But check that guy out, and he might know someone that's more in your neck of the woods, so you could actually go see, feel, and touch the actual machinery that would be needed, or to at least get a ballpark of what the footprint would be. And I interrupted you. You were going to say something else?
No, I think I was trying to get back into that kind of just the metal stamping and everything. I've read so much about metallurgy in the last couple of weeks. I'm sick of it. But it's very extensive. There's a lot to it. And I have no familiarity with that kind of machining environment in terms of manufacturing. So it's definitely learning a lot.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to find out. In your research, have you seen where companies like Petzl or Black Diamond, are they making their carabiners stateside, or are they making them elsewhere? Do you know?
I found one place in North Carolina that had Petzl listed as a client. Black Diamond has opened a new manufacturing suite in Salt Lake City by their headquarters. But they split, I think it's something like 30% there, 70% somewhere in China. And so it's kind of, I've seen a lot of different metal manufacturing vendors. And because of the kind of QA and safety ratings aspect of it, a lot of it's done in the developed world. So it's less so outsourced because because a failed product can mean somebody dies, and then people are less likely to kind of offshore it. But those places are pretty walled off, I'm assuming, because of a lot of proprietary designs and techniques and whatnot. So I sent emails to many places asking for insight into the development process, and I don't know if I'm using the wrong verbiage, but nobody has responded.
That's not uncommon. I'm sorry you're running into that, but
I was going to say, that's another thing I was bringing up. Like, I don't really know how to reach out to some of these companies in the right way. And like, I'm sending out emails, but I mean, I haven't heard anything back, but I'm trying to pretend I'm a potential customer. So I'm hoping they'll catch their eye a little bit, but.
Well, you are a potential customer, so you don't have to pretend too much.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. I mean,
yeah, typically you would kind of, outline, I've got this new product I'd like to start developing. Could you give me some quotes on prices? Or can you lead me in the right direction? If you can't answer my questions, can you provide me information with someone who might be able to? I'd like to get some comps, some quotes. Like graphic designers, it's not uncommon for them to give you 3 or 4 comps just so you can see the nature of their work before you hire them. So, so I would take it as I'm trying to get this product to market and I'd like to hire your services.
When you pitch that to somebody, do you have them sign a non-disclosure? Because you don't want to be giving them all your information and then they just run with it.
Well, yes, you would. So you can get up through a lot with just talking, but at some point, in order to get an accurate cost, you're going to have to tell them. So that's when you'd and again, Evan too, most of these companies have their own non-disclosure. So you can, go within companies. Now, like for example, we were trying to pitch an idea to Yeti coolers, but they sent us their NDA that essentially said, if we don't like it, we can still make it. So we're like, well, we're not going to sign it. So, when we went to Big Agnes, we wanted to show them a whole bunch of products, but they wouldn't sign it. They're like, well, we just want to do a handshake. We're like, well, we're not going to show you then because, you can, but at some point, to answer your question, Sammy, if you get into the meat of it all, you're going to have to sign or have them sign something that protects you and your intellectual property. Yes.
Okay.
But they can still quote you and give you ballparks without necessarily knowing your idea in totality. Okay. Awesome. Becca? Kennedy?
Actually, I kind of had the same, I kind of posted about it, but the same issue as Sammy did, just with basic packaging. And I was just actually looking at the link you posted back on the old discussion. Because just searching and trying to find stuff for a cardboard box, it's you come up with moving boxes or the wording is very hard. And so something that I thought would probably be the easiest part has actually became the hardest part, is just finding out a small box, couple inches by a couple inches, how much that would cost. And that's been one of my biggest struggles. So I was just looking at that link.
And I sent that link of a Google search I did, and then I sent another link of an actual company of that actually does that. And if you go to their website, you can see some pretty good examples of what they do. Now he came to us and left us a whole bunch of samples. Maybe I should snap a few pictures and upload those because we wrote the price of what it would be for each one on it because he was doing some packaging for OtterBox phone cases, for a variety of hunting and fishing materials. So I'll do that tomorrow. It's at my office, but I'll do that tomorrow and upload it just to kind of to share with everyone, just so you can all get a better idea. We're dealing with a local guy that is using clamshell plastic, which is the containers that close upon themselves and then you can hang them. And his biggest feedback that he's getting from companies is they don't like the packaging. So, and in this day and age, people care about recycled. People care about post-consumer waste. They care about, like I showed you with this goggle sock, they want it so it's all recyclable, and they even have an address so you can mail it back to them so they can send it again, because that's important to a lot of people in our industry. So anything else you're running into, Kennedy?
That would be like the main thing. And I guess something I also just haven't thought too much about is what it's going to cost to actually put all this together. Kind of like when we were just talking about the engineering of like the apps and stuff, like how much it's going to cost to get, I don't know if I would go through like the same company that does the original Chews, but like if they could adapt their process to make it like this way, like how would that cost? Like what would the cost of that be? Just in general, to change the whole process kind of.
Right, because when you're doing a build of material, you might not necessarily think about the personnel that need to be around to put products together, or to run apps, or to do, software engineering. So yeah, that's a great point that we all should keep in mind, is we need to keep that in mind for sure. But how do you do that? Well, you just ballpark, what you think a fair living wage would be for, and then, for a low powered employee, all the way up to what you might need for some sort of management position as well. So again, you can ballpark that just by your own lifestyle and people that are in positions of management and whatnot. So anything else, Kennedy?
No, I think that was the biggest thing, because when I was doing my or the last assignment, I was able to like kind of break down like the rice paper and how much would be used and how much like per inch is going to be used for each tube. But then I got to the box and I kind of gave it more of a ballpark answer of, I found that it's about 9% of cost is about what packaging for some stuff is, and so I kind of went off that.
Great.
So that's been that was my hardest. That's been my struggle. It's
great. Awesome. How about you, Becca?
Since I changed my project, I feel a lot better about it now, for sure. Yeah, I'm doing a service that specifically targets larger, overweight women. All the barriers to entry that they have, in addition to not feeling like they're capable, and also not even being able to get appropriately sized gear, like a rain jacket or rain pants and stuff like that. So it's a guide outfitter service that is an online gear rental, but then also guided trips service as well. So luckily I get to do all of my engineering for the product through a familiarization trip with some bloggers, or even some physicians that specialize in body dysmorphia, or all of the psychological things that go along with that, to see if it is a good product, and if it really does meet the needs of that sort of target. So I feel good now that I changed it.
Yeah, so you're psyched on the change. You've been working on it for a few weeks now. Yours is a little bit different angle than a product or an app. What
Right.
kind of challenges are you finding when it comes to finding what it would cost?
Yeah, definitely. I would need to source a liability insurance for those guided trips, and even for gear as well, especially if it's gear like skis and stuff like that. But outside of that, I think the costs are really just associated with finding an appropriate like gear, like REI, Columbia, Outdoor Research. They're all really starting to get on board with making larger sizes, especially for women.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, it's all super expensive because it's technological gear. Like it's, it wants to perform the
Good
same way
gear.
everybody would. Yeah, exactly. It's good gear.
Right.
Yeah.
Becca,
Yeah.
you might want to look at how I think REI is teamed up with, I think it's Brooks Running and like a couple other brands to try and answer the idea of how we don't have a large like size run for larger women in the stores. So they're actually going around and doing like trial, I don't know what the word, like events. So they'll have like these companies that are starting to make larger sizes for women and men. They'll actually like come and they'll host an event, like a garage sale, but not, where like they can actually like come and try on the clothing. They can try on all these new products, so that they can actually physically touch and see what it's going to look like on them, since a lot of the larger size runs are online still.
Right.
That might be a good way for you to kind of like even just like talk to those brands about getting like some sort of like sponsor, like getting behind it, or like what that might look like for like a rental, like to have a jacket to rent for your trips, for example. I don't know if that'd be like a good source or not, but it might be something good to look into.
Well, it is, because they also have their Force of Nature, which
Mhm.
has grants for stuff like this to get more women in the outdoors, for sure. So I have looked into them. I didn't know that they partnered with Brooks to do specific events. And yeah, you're right. It is like demo day at resorts. You know?
Yeah.
And it certainly wouldn't hurt to reach out to Canberra Outdoors to see what they're doing in that realm, or if they have any sort of desire to incorporate. Inclusion is ginormous in our industry right now, and I don't think that anyone would scoff at your line of questioning, because it's an awesome idea, Becca, and I love it. So
yeah, Canberra Outdoors is one of the people that I've been looking into, and then we all know Myrna, that ultra runner that does not fit the typical ultra runner physique. So what I'd like to do is, once I build my sales deck, send it out to the bloggers and just be like, this is something that we're considering. Is this something that you would like to try, or what would make you want to participate in this product or this service and stuff like that? Just kind of go ahead and put it out to product testing right away.
And then if outside of our industry, you see some really quality public or PR work when it comes, like Dove soaps. They are always doing things, or what's the one, like Target made a huge push to use real looking models in all of their work. So something that don't be afraid to think a little bit outside of the proverbial box and get more knowledge and notoriety behind you.
Right. Yeah.
Awesome. Go
Yeah.
ahead. I'm sorry.
As a resource, so are you just doing like outdoor clothing in general, or are you looking into ski gear too?
Well, we'd start out with outdoor clothing and camping stuff. So my friend Natalie is who really inspired me to think of this, because I used to live with her, and she would see me bring my raft home and then go out on a trip, and she always wanted to do it. But in her head, and I can't believe she never said this to me, she's like, I don't think that if I fell out of the boat that you could pull me back in. And so she just like tells herself that she can't go because she hasn't seen or experienced or heard of anybody her size going. And so I can't remember where this line of where my thought process was going. So we're starting with a multi-night, like a one-night Ruby Horse Thief raft trip. So right now, at least in my build of materials, I had rain jackets and rain pants that we could use as splash gear, dry bags, which aren't necessarily size specific, but then also sleeping bags and sleeping pads that they won't fall out of, or that will properly zip and keep them warm and stuff like that. So not necessarily ski gear yet for phase 1, but for phase 2, yeah, for sure, eventually.
Well, a company you should look at if like you did want to look into ski clothing is Obermeyer.
Okay.
Because when I worked in Crest Butte up at Butte and Company, the ski shop up there, we would bring in like a few size runs of larger sizes for snow pant jackets in just like very basic colors. But we actually rented apparel there and just kind of on the side, and didn't really push it too hard because too many people wanted to rent equipment. But we mostly had it there for like families who really couldn't afford to buy all equipment, or people who didn't fit all the norms of sizes, that like we would bring in some larger sizes, but not a ton, because we're not like Vail, so we're not getting as much of a variety of people coming to visit. Where it was like a smaller selection of people, but you still had people who'd come in the store and they were like a 3 or so XL, and they didn't have the stuff, they probably were never going to go skiing again. And so that's kind of why we had the rental equipment, was to cater to these people that we still really wanted to get them out there and make it possible for them not have to A, buy a whole new wardrobe, and B, not even have the clothing fit correctly.
Right.
So if you want to ask my old boss Stephanie about it,
Yeah.
She's amazing. Stephanie Allen. She owns Butte & Company Ski and Snowboard Rental Shop. But I mean, that was some of the best days, was when people would come in. They were just the people you would never expect to go skiing, and getting them out there and in clothes that they were comfortable in was some of the better and cooler days.
Nice.
And Obermeyer is certainly known as a ski company, but they do make a lot of different equipment that might not necessarily be ski specific.
Yeah, and they really do cater to people, and knowing that their bodies are different. Like, they're one of the biggest companies I've seen that do like petite snow pants, short, long, extra long, like triple XL, like whatever. They just have the biggest variety I've seen in ski clothing.
Nice.
And, interesting, Becca, as you're talking about taking a Ruby Horse Thief trip or backcountry skiing, anything like that, make sure you do include the cost of permitting in there as well. Because, as soon as you take clients out, you're a commercial company. So, if it was to go down a river like the Arkansas, you're going to pay a lot of money for that permit. But this day and age, you see companies that can buy excess permits from existing permit holders. So that might be an option for you as well. Because, you're right. You could probably get away for your first dozen trips of saying we're just a group of friends going out. But sometimes you're going to get legitimate. So you should at least know what those costs are going to be. And in some places, they're not that much.
Yeah, good point.
Awesome. Any other thoughts? Awesome ideas. I'm glad you guys are going through this. I know it's a hard process. I do it all the time. And sometimes you spend, as Alan said, hours and hours doing something to get one step forward. But that's the nature of why we're doing it, just so you can get a good idea of how it works. So, and the reason I have you do the build of material first is it's going to help you create a better quality sales deck in the end. So, I'm happy, as I did with Caitlin last week, and I'm happy to hop on a phone call if you need me to, or if some of you are local, I'll be happy to sit down with you to clarify or to help you brainstorm or think about it from a different angle. So feel free to reach out to me. I know Sammy asked me if I could hop on a call, and I'm happy to do that. So anyway, with that said, again, we won't have a class next week, but that final class on the, let's see, what's the day of the week? That is the 18th. We're going to do it 18th at 5 o'clock, and that's when you'll all have the ability to give your pitch and ask questions. Any other thoughts before we part ways?
Is there a point breakdown of the semester? I wasn't able to find one.
It should be up. Yes, there is. I've got all that. So I'll check Blackboard tonight. I thought I put that up in the first week.
You could have, and I just couldn't have found it.
No, but let me check from mine, and if not, I'll just email it all to you. It's not a complex breakdown by any means, but yeah, you should have that for sure.
Cool. Thank you.
And is there a breakdown for how long? I know our presentation's 10 minutes, but any future papers that we submit?
Like beyond what Evan's looking for?
No, you said the point breakdown will include page amounts and page numbers and
No, it'll just include a breakdown of what each assignment's worth. And as far as minimums and maximums of page amounts, well, those have been associated with each assignment. But with these particular assignments that are coming up with your build of material and your sales deck and your presentation, well, those are not going to be, those don't have a minimum length to them because each product will be different. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, that's what I was kind of getting at. I wasn't sure if there was a minimum or requirement for those.
No, it's just the minimum is, Sammy, you have to get your point across to us all.
Yeah. Okay.
Awesome. Any other thoughts? I'll again be posting this video once it converts and downloads, and I put it up on YouTube if you need to refer back to it. But other than that, you all have a great evening. And again, feel free to reach out to me in any capacity.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks.
Have a good evening. Thank you.